Good afternoon, art students. This is Mr. Verzat, and today we're going to talk about creating from the imagination. So what we're going to do is look at the big idea for this screencast, and that is that you don't have to look at something every time you draw. It is actually possible to create from your imagination. And we're just going to explore some tips and techniques on how to get what's in your brain on the paper. This represents you at a desk drawing. And so how do you get what's in your brain translated onto the paper? I use the word translate because just like there's no perfect translation between languages, also there's not going to be a perfect translation between what's in your head and what's put on the paper. To this day, I still cannot get what's in my head perfectly on the paper. We're going to look at how that works and why, and how that's actually a good thing, believe it or not, especially if you're psychotic. So what do you have to do in order to make this work? Well, first of all, you need to have a picture in your head. You need to have not only just an idea of what you want to do, but actually visualize it. Imagine yourself standing in front of an empty frame in a museum. What does that piece look like? And that piece representing what your work is eventually going to be. So what do? Well, I like to draw what is interesting to me and fun. So if you're drawing for fun, or even for an assignment that's wide open, get a picture in your head, something that you want to do that's interesting to you. Okay? So let's break it down. You first need a picture in your head of what you want to create. What is it? A robot? I love doing big, crazy robots. Dragons, and those are awesome too. Scenery, animals, a beautiful landscape. How do you get it out of your head on the paper? Well, I've broken it down to a couple of different areas. The first is kind of the most straightforward. The first one is using the learned techniques that I've taught you in class. For example, pre-drawing. Pre-drawing helps you make your drawing more refined. Man, that'd be a great way to get what's kind of the gist of the alignment of what's in that picture in your head on the paper. It's a great way to plot it out. Also, in tandem, in addition to those learned techniques, is proficiency. That word means doing something well, or how well you have mastered those techniques. So one of the ways to get the picture on the paper is using those techniques and using them well. By using those techniques that you were taught, you'll have more tools, which is the good thing. It gives you more tools to actually get it to work, to translate it onto the paper. The better your proficiency, the better the translation. The more it'll look like what's in your head, though it won't be perfect, and once again, you'll see why. The next way to get it out of your head and on the paper is through the use of motor control. Now, I don't mean working on a car. I mean your ability for your mind to tell your body what to do. That's what motor control is. Motor control is how well your body does what your mind tells it to do. Your motor skill is affected by a couple of things: age and practice. I want you guys to take a quick look at something here. Let's take a look at the brain. All right, everybody's got a brain, and that brain is made of neurons. Neurons are tiny cells that communicate with electricity. They're also connected to each other. And one of the ways that we become good at something is by those neurons creating more and more branching little tendrils that connect to other neurons. That comes through practice. Now, the way your brains work, being that you're younger than I am, your brains are growing. And so one of the factors that influences your motor control, your motor skills, is your age. Now, when I was in 3rd grade, I loved to do art, and I noticed that in the 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade areas, all the students there, their work was way better than mine, even though I drew all the time and did a lot of art. The reason for that is they were older. They had more developed neuron connections. They had better motor control, and the older you get, generally, the better your motor control is. That tapers off at about your mid to late 20s, I believe, and then you get middle age, and then the older you get, like in your 50s and 60s, it starts to drop again. But if you're having trouble drawing and mastering some techniques, just because your hands and your arms and your body won't do what your mind's telling it to do, that might be a factor as age, which means you'll get better as you grow. Also, Practice is another one to get your motor control better. The neurons, once again in your brain, connect little tendrils to each other. The more you do something, the more neurons connect to each other. So if the part of your brain that is responsible for doing art, you do that a lot, you'll get more connections there. We call that a neural pathway. So as you practice, you create more and more little neural pathways in your tendrils and such, and your brain communicates better. These little lightning bolts are neurons firing, kind of an artist rendition of it. So practice will help you there. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And that's how you improve motor control. The fourth piece in getting to create from your imagination is simply just letting things happen. Now, it's common in beginning artists, and I've seen it a lot, they're all focused on perfection. For example, I had a student who spent 5 days working on making sure the pants that he was drawing on this cowboy were just right. Problem is, he lost 5 days on his assignment because it was a scenery piece, and he didn't get it done. I noticed one thing about his piece is he did all this work on trying to make it perfect. His mindset was to get it perfect, and it ended up being stiff and tight. And compared to some of his other work that he wasn't focused on perfection on, it was actually, the older work was better. Letting things happen is something that you need to get in the mindset of. It's okay if you make a mistake. Perfection, what is that? Humans aren't perfect. I don't know about you, but I've gotten bad grades on tests. If we're imperfect beings, then what we get out of our head is not going to translate onto the paper in art. So naturally, things are going to happen that you don't have control over. All right? So allow yourself to just let things happen. It'll make your work better, believe it or not. Loosen up. Loosen up. If you're all uptight about perfection and making it look perfect, your work is actually going to suffer because of it. Seriously. So let's just summarize. How do you get creation from the imagination? Have a picture in your head. Use the techniques I teach you in class. Get good at those techniques. All right? Use your motor control. Be aware of that. Your age might affect that. Your practice might affect that. And finally, let things happen. Be spontaneous. All right? Let's go and look at some examples down here. All right. Easter Bunny Rampage. This is an original piece. I didn't look at any pictures for it. Now, I've looked at a lot of rabbits in my day, just because I, as your teacher, like animals. And I'm pretty familiar with kind of the gist of how they're put together, you know? What parts are what size, how big the head is compared to their feet, that kind of thing. And so I created this cartoon picture, and I used pre-drawing to start it. I started with pre-drawing. Let's go look back over here. I used those learned techniques, all the stuff that I'm teaching in class, I used for this picture. So let's kind of look at it here. When you make a piece, when you make your piece, things will happen that you can't control. That's okay, and it's actually a good thing, and here's why. It gives your work a unique sense of personality. Original work has a life of its own. Be original, be creative. Things happen in your piece. You'll make a mistake, and you'll have to think, okay, do I erase a mistake, or do I incorporate it into the piece? And if you learn to incorporate it into the piece and adapt, your work will take on a life of its own. It'll be unique and have personality and energy. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting, and things will happen on that paper that aren't planned, that were in your mind. And you'll have to adapt to that. And it becomes this dance between you creating and you trying to imagine. And that's how your work takes life and makes it is interesting. It is cool. All right? So how did I do this piece? Once again, as I told you earlier, I pre-drew it. I used just basic shapes. Just as in the previous online demos you've seen, I kind of tightened up my lines. I used hatching and cross-hatching, different pencil techniques just to get different effects and textures like the fur, everything that you learn in class, as a matter of fact. Now, how much you do it and how much you practice will determine if it looks like that or not. Who knows? After you've been drawing as long as I have, you'll probably be better than me later on. So, one of the things that keeps you uptight, comparing yourself to others. Don't compare yourself to others. Seriously. My band teacher told me, no matter how good you think you are, there's always somebody better. All right? And me, I used to compare myself to others. It was miserable. I'd get depressed as an artist. I'd go through times where, oh man, I don't want to do this anymore because I suck. You know? I eventually learned that if you create art because you enjoy it, That's most important, no matter how good you are or how good your neighbor is next to you. You know, it's easy to get dissuaded. It's easy to get knocked down. Do it for the purpose of doing it. Enjoy it. Have fun. Don't do it to compare yourself to another person. Seriously, because there's always somebody better. Okay? So, let's take a look at some non-examples of not drawing from your imagination. Okay? So this is some student work right here. This is a cartoon character that we're all familiar with. Okay? And this was from an assignment. We were doing a landscape painting. And this student, because she'd made some bad choices on how to use her time during the assignment time, found herself kind of pressed for time at the end of the deadline. And so she decided, oh, well, I'm just going to copy a cartoon character picture. And she hammered this thing out like in a day or two, and then turned it in. And it was a landscape piece, which was interesting enough. So naturally, because of her choices, didn't get a good grade on it. So I suggest you avoid doing that. So here's what happens when you copy something. Especially something that other people are familiar with, like this cartoon character, mistakes are way more evident. And here's the creepy thing. That means everybody's going to see them. So, I mean, if everybody's seen this character, they're familiar with what they look like, with what this character looks like, and you go to draw it, if you make a mistake, everyone's going to see it because they're familiar with them. So already you're going to be uptight, and it's all about perfection in your piece. There's not going to be that originality and that life and that creativity that bubbles up from the creation process there. It's all going to be about making it look like you're seeing it look. And it's going to be stiff. It's going to be lacking life. It's just going to be what any photocopier can do. And that might be great for learning how to draw a form, as we'll see, but try to avoid doing that. Now, when is there a good time to do that kind of stuff, where you look at something? Well, for starters, there is a place, but that's outside of the class. The purpose of this class is to teach you techniques. I find that for beginning artists, the best way to learn is for you to be given some things that you can look at and practice those techniques by reproducing them, and then for the rest of the year, having learned those techniques, then use that to create with originality. So feel free to copy all you want outside of class. It's a great way, and let's take a look, it's a great way to study a form. I don't know about you, I wasn't born knowing how to draw a horse. I've been around that many horses. Seriously. But I'm sure some of you guys have. You may have looked at horses more than me. Me? I would learn how to draw a horse better by drawing horses and looking at a picture for them. I would do that as if I were using training wheels on a bike. And my goal would be to eventually get rid of the training wheels. So I would draw those horses, I would pre-draw them, learn where all those basic shapes were, and eventually I would hope to get to the point where I wouldn't have to look at a horse anymore. That's what it means to study your forms, how all those pieces come together. Here's another reason there's another place for drawing other things. If you're hired by the owners to draw them. I have a buddy at the Career Center, Russell Walks. He is actually hired by, he's a freelance artist, and he's done work for Lucasfilm, LucasArts, and that's the company that made Star Wars. He's done posters for him, and so he had to look at pictures of the actors to create these posters, which means, once again, remember that one of the faults in copying things is if you make a mistake, everybody notices. That means anyone who's seen Star Wars, they know what Luke Skywalker looks like, and if he makes a mistake, they'll see it. So it takes a lot of skill in reality to copy something accurately. So if you're hired by that company to draw licensed properties like Star Wars or Star Trek, comic book heroes and such, here's another way where it can be a good thing to copy things. Take your own photos and make a painting or a drawing of those photos. That's great. That's a great way to learn. If you're hired to do a portrait of somebody, well, naturally you need to look at something. And in our day and age today, we've got photographs. So that's another time that you can use it. But in this class, the goal for me is to teach you the techniques, and so that you can eventually create from imagination with originality. So I hope this was helpful for you. And we'll go over some of this in class. I'll be drawing a lot of stuff in front of you guys, and we'll be doing the same thing with each other. So, and I look forward to seeing you in class, and I'll see you later. Bye.